"Let's raise a glass," my father said, his voice thick with pride and whiskey. "To our son, the responsible one. The success story. The man who never needed help." The room erupted with claps and laughter. Crystal glasses clinked. My brother, Ethan, smirked at me across the table, his gold watch catching the light like a spotlight on everything I wasn't. Then my mother leaned in and said it, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Unlike you, Anna. You always needed saving." The laughter that followed didn't sound like family. It sounded like fire. I froze. The air thickened. My chest burned, but my face didn't move. Years of training, of swallowing hurt, kept me still. "My name is Anna," I said quietly in my head, gripping my glass to keep from shaking. "And from wherever you're watching this, stay with me. Have you ever been treated like a stranger in your own family?" Because that night, surrounded by relatives and fake smiles, I realized I wasn't one of them. I was their punchline. Ethan stood, sliding his arm around our father's shoulders. "She's not doing too bad," he said, pretending to defend me. "Didn't you say she finally got a job at that small firm? What's it called again?" His smirk deepened. He knew exactly what it was called. The firm I'd built from the ground up. The one I worked 16-hour days for. But I stayed silent. They wouldn't understand. They never did. "Maybe next year," my mom said, smiling sweetly, "you'll have something worth toasting." I looked around the table, faces glowing with cruel amusement. People who shared my blood but not my loyalty. When my father announced Ethan's promotion, the room exploded again. I clapped too. Because that's what you do when you're the family disappointment. You applaud your own humiliation. Then my dad turned to me. "Don't worry, sweetheart," he said, chuckling. "If things get too hard, your brother can lend you a few dollars." The laughter came again. This time louder. I felt every note pierce through me like glass. That was when I made a promise, silent but sharp. They would regret this toast. Not because I'd yell or cry or beg, but because soon, they'd know who really needed saving. And who was the one they should have never underestimated. That night, as I drove home in silence, the city lights blurred through my tears. But underneath the heartbreak, something else was rising. It wasn't anger. It was purpose. Because humiliation has a strange aftertaste. It burns, but it also feeds you. And I was about to turn every cruel word they said into a weapon sharper than their laughter. They thought I was weak. But they had no idea what I'd built in the shadows of their mockery. The kind of strength that doesn't beg for respect. It demands it. 3 days after that dinner, my phone buzzed at 2:14 a.m. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer until I saw the name flash on the screen. Ethan. His voice was shaky. Not the confident, smug tone he wore at the party. This was different, hollow, desperate. "Anna, I need your help. Please don't hang up." For a second I almost laughed. The irony was cruel and perfect. "Didn't you tell everyone I was broke?" I said, my voice ice cold. Silence. Then a breath. "I just need, look, can we talk in person?" I agreed. Not out of kindness but curiosity. The next morning he showed up at my office. Not my small firm, as he'd mocked. My company. The space gleamed with glass walls, city views, and a logo he'd never noticed before. Kane Consulting. My last name. My creation. He looked around, pretending not to be impressed. But his eyes gave him away. "You're doing okay," he muttered. "Better than okay," I said. "What's wrong, Ethan?" He hesitated, rubbing his temples. "I messed up. I took some risky loans. Business investments. It's not as bad as it sounds, but I need around $80,000 by next week to clear it. Otherwise what?" His silence told me everything. For the first time I saw what my parents refused to see. Their golden boy wasn't shining, he was drowning. "How did this happen?" I asked softly. He avoided my eyes. "You wouldn't understand." That line. That same arrogant tone. Even begging, he couldn't let go of it. So I smiled. "You're right. I probably wouldn't. But I can lend you something." His eyes lit up. "Advice." He blinked. "You're joking." "No," I said. "I'm evolving." He stormed out, muttering curses, slamming the glass door so hard the walls trembled. And I sat back in my chair feeling the universe shift, finally slightly in my favor. 2 days later my parents called. My mother's voice was sugar-coated panic. "Sweetheart, your brother's going through a rough patch. We thought maybe you could help. You know, since you don't have a family or kids to support." There it was, the familiar jab dressed in guilt. "I'm sorry, Mom," I said. "My money's tied up in real responsibilities." Pause. Then her tone cracked. "I didn't raise you to be cruel." "No," I said quietly. "You raised me to be quiet. That was your mistake." I hung up. That night, I walked into my bedroom, stood in front of the mirror and whispered to my reflection. They wanted a helpless girl. But I've been building a fortress while they laughed. Because sometimes revenge doesn't start with action. It starts with silence. And silence has gravity. It pulls secrets to the surface. And Ethan's secrets? They were about to come crawling into the light. The next week, the city hosted a charity gala. The kind my parents lived for. The kind where people wore smiles like armor and lies like perfume. Ethan was there, of course. Tailored suit. Polished shoes. The same gold watch, the one he'd bought with borrowed money. My parents hovered beside him like proud curators of a masterpiece. I almost skipped it. But something inside me, quiet, sharp, and deliberate, told me to go. When I arrived, heads turned. Not because of my dress, though it was striking, but because no one expected me to show up. They thought I'd lick my wounds. They didn't know I was done hiding. The night unfolded with the usual champagne and hollow praise. Then came the auction. A local reporter was covering the event, interviewing prominent families of the city. And of course, my father made sure we got the spotlight. The camera light flickered on. "Mr. Kane," the reporter smiled, "it's inspiring to see both your children succeeding in such different paths." My father laughed. "Well, Ethan's been our pride since day one. Responsible, smart." He looked at me briefly, and always looking out for his sister. The mic turned toward me. "And you, Anna? What's it like having a brother like that?" I smiled. "It's enlightening," I said softly. "You learn a lot from people who pretend to be everything they're not." The room chuckled politely, unsure if it was a joke. But Ethan's smile flickered. Because he knew I wasn't joking. Later that evening, I slipped away from the main hall and found Ethan outside, arguing on the phone. Always collapses beautifully. 2 days later, my mother showed up at my apartment unannounced. She never visited before, not once. Not when I moved in. Not when I opened my firm. Not when I got sick last winter and ended up in the ER alone. But now, here she was, trembling, clutching her designer purse like a life raft. "Anna, you need to fix this," she said before I could even say hello. "Fix what?" "Your brother's situation. The news, the articles, it's everywhere. He's losing clients. Your father can barely show his face at the club." I leaned against the counter, calm. "Then maybe you should have raised better men." Her eyes flashed with shock, like she couldn't believe her little girl had teeth. "Don't talk like that. This family's name means something." "Oh, it does," I said quietly. "It means manipulation, denial, and debt. Quite the legacy." She took a deep breath, lowering her voice. "I know you resent him, but this will destroy him. Please, Anna. We can't survive another scandal." That word "we" sliced through me. Because when they mocked me at that party, it was never we. It was you. You're the failure. You're the burden. Now suddenly we were a family again. "I can't help him," I said softly. "And I won't." Her voice broke. "He's your brother." I looked at her, then really looked. "Was I ever your daughter?" She flinched like I'd hit her. Then turned and left, the echo of her heels sharp against the hallway floor, like tiny hammers cracking something fragile. That night I found myself scrolling through the headlines again. Ethan's empire was unraveling faster than even I expected. Clients were pulling out. Investors were suing. And his once perfect LinkedIn profile? Deleted. My phone buzzed again. A message from Dad. "Whatever you did, undo it. You're embarrassing yourself. This family's reputation is worth more than your pride." I stared at the screen, fingers trembling, Not with guilt but with something close to grief. Because even now, even when their perfect son's lies were burning in public, they still couldn't see me. Not as the one who built herself from nothing. Only as the one who ruined their illusion. A few days later Ethan called. His voice was wrecked. "Anna, please. They froze my accounts. I might lose the house. I can't." I let the silence sit heavy between us. "Now you know what begging feels like," I said softly. He exhaled a shaky, broken sound. "You got what you wanted, right? You humiliated me." "No, Ethan," I whispered. "You did that yourself. I just stopped cleaning up your mess." I ended the call and sank into my chair, staring at the city lights outside. There's something haunting about watching justice unfold. It doesn't roar. It whispers. Like ashes falling after a long, bright fire. But I wasn't done yet. Not even close. Because the party that started my humiliation? Another one was coming, same family, same faces, same laughter. Only this time, I was bringing the toast. The next family party was at the same house, same chandeliers, same hollow laughter that used to make my skin crawl. But this time I didn't arrive small. I arrived seen. My heels clicked against the marble like gunfire. Every head turned. Every whisper followed. And for the first time in my life, I didn't shrink. Ethan was there, of course. He looked human. The arrogance stripped off him like old paint. His once perfect suit hung loose. His eyes were bloodshot from nights without sleep. When he saw me, his mouth twitched, half apology, half resentment. But before he could speak, our father's booming voice cut through the air. "Well, look who decided to join us," he said, fake smile plastered across his face. "Our successful daughter." The room chuckled softly. The same crowd that once laughed louder. But they didn't know. This time I'd written the script. Dinner started. Polite conversation, fake praise, and attention so thick it could choke the air. I waited until the wine was poured, until the laughter hit that perfect pitch of comfort. Then I stood. "Before we eat," I said, raising my glass, "I'd like to make a toast." Every fork froze. My mother's eyes widened. It was the same line my father had used the night they humiliated me. I smiled. "To family, the people who tell you who you are even when they've never really looked at you." A murmur rippled through the room. I turned toward Ethan. "And to my brother, the golden boy who once told me I'd never succeed without help." The silence was surgical. I took a breath. Funny thing is, while he was hiding debt, I was doubling my firm's revenue. While he was lying to investors, I was paying off mom and dad's second mortgage. Anonymously, by the way. A gasp. Chairs creaked. My father's jaw tightened. "See, I never needed saving," I continued softly. "I was just waiting for the day I could stop pretending to need them." Ethan's face went pale. "You think this makes you better?" he whispered. "No," I said. "It makes me free." I turned to my parents. "You told everyone I had to beg for money. You told them I was a burden. But I was the one keeping this family afloat. Quietly. You just never cared to ask where the money came from." My mother's hand trembled over her glass. My father's eyes darted toward the door as if he could escape the truth. The room was dead quiet. The kind of silence that only follows revelation. I set down my glass. "Here's the truth," I said. "I used to think blood meant loyalty. Now I know it just means inheritance. Of silence, of lies, of pride." I smiled gently, almost sadly. "But I'm done inheriting." Then I walked out. Not rushed. Not dramatic. Just done. As I reached the door, I heard Ethan's voice, cracked, small. "Anna, wait." I didn't. Because when you've spent your life being small for others, walking away isn't cruelty. It's resurrection. The next morning I woke up to a dozen missed calls. That unknown numbers. And one from a reporter. The video of my toast had gone viral. Someone, maybe a relative, maybe fate, had recorded the whole thing and posted it online. "Daughter exposes family's lies at dinner. Watch what she says at the end." 10 million views in 12 hours. My voice, the same one they'd trained to stay small, was echoing across the internet. By noon, the phone at my office wouldn't stop ringing. Clients congratulated me, strangers emailed me stories about their own betrayals. They called it inspiring, empowering, brave. But it didn't feel like any of those things. It felt heavy. Because behind the applause there was fallout. Dad was asked to step down from his golf board. Temporary leave, they called it, but we both knew better. Mom had canceled her charity luncheons. Too much attention, she said in a voicemail that sounded more like a confession. And Ethan, he disappeared from social media completely. That night he showed up at my door again. No suit. No watch. Just a man stripped down to the truth. I'm not here to fight, he said quietly. I just needed to see you. I didn't answer, but I let him in. For a moment neither of us spoke. The silence was thick, the kind you earn after years of pretending. Finally he said, "They hate me now. Mom won't even look at me. Dad says I ruined everything." I laughed, not cruelly, just tired. "Welcome to my world." He nodded slowly, eyes glassy. I didn't realize how much they built their love on performance. I looked at him, really looked. "You didn't ruin everything, Ethan. You just exposed what was already broken." He swallowed hard. "And you? Are you happy now?" The question hit me like a mirror I didn't want to face. Was I? For years I dreamed of this. The truth out, the lies burned, the roles reversed. But now that it had happened, all I felt was empty. Because revenge doesn't fill you. It clears you out, leaves space where pain used to live. I sighed. "No, Ethan. Not happy. Just done." He nodded, wiped his face and whispered, "I deserved this." Then he left, not with anger but with a strange kind of relief. After he was gone, I sat on the couch and looked at the city below, bright, buzzing, alive. Somewhere out there my parents were nursing their shame. Somewhere else strangers were watching my story, calling me strong. But the truth? Strength isn't loud. It's lonely. That night I turned off my phone, lit a candle and whispered to the quiet. This isn't revenge anymore. It's release. Because sometimes justice doesn't roar like thunder. Sometimes it sighs, softly, and walks away barefoot through the ashes. 2 weeks later I got the letter. Handwritten. No return address. Just my name and my mother's looping script. For a moment I almost didn't open it. But something about the way my name looked, fragile, careful, almost guilty, made me tear it open. Inside were 3 lines. Your father's not well. He wants to see you. Please come home. Home. The word felt foreign. So I went. The house looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, spiritually. Like the air inside it had grown tired of holding secrets. Mom met me at the door. Her face was bare, makeup gone, eyes red. For the first time she looked like a person, not a performance. He's in his study, she said quietly. I walked down that long hallway, the one where I used to hear them whispering about me, and pushed open the door. Dad sat behind his desk, frail, his once commanding voice replaced by shallow breaths. The same man who mocked me in front of a room full of people now looked like time itself had humbled him. When he saw me, his lips trembled. Anna, he said softly, you came. I nodded, silent. He gestured weakly to the chair across from him. I owe you an apology. The words landed awkwardly, like a foreign language he'd never practiced before. I was wrong, he continued. About you. About everything. You didn't deserve what we did. I was so proud of Ethan I couldn't see anything else. He paused, coughing, gripping the edge of his desk. When you were little you always wanted to be seen. And I thought keeping you humble was protecting you. But I was just blind. I felt my throat tighten. The anger that used to roar inside me flickered into something gentler. Not forgiveness but understanding. He looked at me again, eyes glassy. I watched that video. You spoke with strength. You reminded me of your mother when she still believed in herself. From the doorway, Mom wiped a tear, silent. For a moment, the 3 of us just breathed. The quiet kind that comes when truth finally finds air after years underground. Then Dad whispered, "Can you forgive me?" I looked at him, the man who built my shame now asking to be freed from his own. I don't know if I can, I said truthfully. But I'm not here to hurt you anymore. He nodded slowly. That's enough. When I left, Mom followed me to the porch. The sun was setting, orange bleeding into gray. I never knew how cruel we were, she said softly. I thought we were raising you strong. I didn't realize we were breaking you. I looked at her and for once I didn't see my mother. I saw a woman who'd lived her whole life obeying other people's versions of love. I'm not broken, I said gently. Just rebuilt differently. She reached for my hand, hesitant, trembling, and this time I didn't pull away. We stood there in silence, the past hanging between us like smoke. As I walked to my car, I didn't feel triumph or sorrow. Just stillness. Like the final note of a long, sad song finally fading into peace. But I knew one last thing remained, not for them but for me. Because forgiveness isn't the end of revenge. It's the evolution of it. 6 months later, I stood in the same ballroom where everything began. Different event, different purpose. This time, the banner above the stage read, Kane Women's Foundation, Empowering Voices Ignored. My foundation. My name. My story repurposed into something that mattered. The air buzzed with cameras, laughter, and something new, respect. I'd used the money from my firm, the publicity from that viral video, and the lessons carved from humiliation to build a fund for women who were dismissed, silenced, or belittled by their own families. Every speech, every story, every check written that night was a rebellion against the version of me they once tried to erase. I walked onto the stage to speak. Spotlights hit my face, but this time they didn't blind me. They lit me. Good evening, I began. When I was younger, I believed love meant silence, that to be accepted I had to be small. But pain has a way of teaching clarity. And clarity is power. The crowd leaned in. I built this foundation for the people who were told they were less. The ones laughed at during dinner tables. The ones who were mocked for dreaming louder than their families could handle. Pause. A deep breath. I was one of them. But I learned something. The truth doesn't destroy families. Pretending does. Applause rippled across the room, soft at first, then thunderous. I looked toward the back where my parents sat quietly. My mother's eyes glistened. My father nodded, fragile but proud in a way he never was before. And beside them, Ethan sat with his head bowed, hands clasped, finally learning how to listen. After the ceremony, as guests drifted out, I stood alone near the balcony. City lights shimmered below, the same skyline I once cried beneath, the same one that watched me rebuild. Mom came up behind me. You did something good, she said. I smiled. I did something true. She nodded, tears in her eyes. I'm proud of you, Anna. The words hit like sunlight, soft, late but real. Thank you, I said. I'm proud of me too. Later that night, when the hall was empty, I walked back to the stage one last time. I ran my fingers along the engraved plaque at the podium. Founded by Anna Kane, for those who refused to stay silent. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to fight, prove, or defend. Because revenge had never been the goal. Freedom was. And standing there, no audience, no applause, I finally understood the difference. I smiled, whispering to the empty room. They said my brother was successful and responsible. Unlike me. Pause. But I was the one who finished the story. I turned off the lights, walked out into the night air, and let the door close softly behind me.